23-year old Alexander was an orphan and was used to solving his problems on his own. The boy had been a student in an orphanage. He was placed there at the age of 10 after living for a year with his oppressive alcoholic stepfather who had no love or sympathy for the boy. The man did not work anywhere and used his stepson as a labor force, forcing him to stand outside for hours in all kinds of weather and beg passers-by for money to buy alcohol with. Mary, Alex's mother, died of a serious illness. She had no money for treatment and her husband did not help her or her child. The boy remembered the bright image of his mother, her smile, her sly eyes and her delicious cooking. The woman said almost nothing about herself, but Alexander loved and always gave him every free minute. Alex's difficult life with his stepfather was interrupted by a vigilant district police officer who noticed the man's strangeness and once brought the case to the attention of the guardianship authorities. Then Alex was assigned to an orphanage. Life there was not the sweetest. At home he was used to keeping a low profile if his stepfather was drunk, and in his new environment the boy soon got the hang of it and began to act deliberately. But fights could not be avoided, they only hardened Alexander's character. The kind, homely child quickly learned that one should not conform to others and tolerate taunts, so he began to defend himself and stand up for those who did not dare. At the orphanage the boy discovered his talent for drawing. Other children were so amazed that they asked to draw their portraits. Even those who used to bully Alex turned to him with the same request. This passion for art the boy had until now. He didn't become an artist, but he didn't abandon his hobby and developed it, drawing the necessary information from various sources. After graduating from the orphanage, Alexander faced a difficult task. He had to decide where to work and where to go. The boy chose construction and mastered the craft of a house painter, it seemed to him closer in spirit. Alex learned how to use all the necessary tools and soon became proficient. Painting with a brush, he recalled how he used to paint pictures on canvas. His talent and neatness couldn't help but be noticed at his place of work, so Alex was promoted to the ranks of high-class specialists. He worked as a member of a construction crew, which included masters of various specializations. The guy lived in a state-issued apartment and did not complain about the conditions. Although his one-bedroom apartment was in need of repair, Alexander was in no hurry to spend every paycheck on it. He lived a lonely life and did not start any serious relationships. He had a few unrequited affairs, but it did not work out any further. One summer afternoon Alexander's crew was sent to work in a three-story country mansion with fancy staircases and a neglected garden where all the paths were overgrown with grass. The mansion was idle for several years, so no one took care of it. The house needed a thorough renovation, both inside and out. After the plasterers restored the walls, Alex began to paint them in fancy colors. The guy was experienced, so he did everything quickly and well. One day he went into the next room and one of the boards of the varnished floor crunched under him. Alexander was frightened and immediately yanked his leg back so that it wouldn't get stuck and he wouldn't get hurt, thereby losing the opportunity to work in such a lucrative place for pay. The guy was surprised and leaned lower, realizing there was a hiding place, a niche, under the board. He already thought he'd found some valuables or money, but all he felt with his hand was a tight pack of envelopes with letters and black and white photographs. Alex did not care about other people's letters, so he did not look at the pictures and get into the private life of strangers and people he did not care about. And why did they put them in here? Alex asked himself in a whisper. It seemed strange to him that the owners had hidden the things dear to his heart in the house they no longer lived in. If they didn't need them, they could just throw them away, not keep them as something forbidden or dangerous. Alexander, without thinking long, sent the find back to its place, about to shout to his colleagues to inspect the floor for other flimsy planks, when a woman's photograph fell out of the general pile at his feet. He froze as he picked it up. From the picture a young girl looked at him with a bright smile, like two peas in a pod similar to his late mother. Although Alex grew up in an orphanage, not having any memory of Mary, still retained her image, he often remembered her, thought that she was in a better place, that she would never willingly leave him, it was all a cursed disease. There could be no doubt. The boy even held his breath, running his finger over his mother's native features. She was as mischievous, as bright as he remembered her, only younger. Alexander was puzzled. Where had his mother's picture come from? He knew nothing about her past or her family, he had no relatives who could help him figure it out. The boy went through the pictures at once, but didn't notice any more familiar faces, but the envelopes had his mother's name on them. Unfortunately, the envelopes had gotten damp, the ink had smudged, and he could not make out much of the letters. But the black and white photo of Mary was clear, and this made Alex begin his search for the truth. He had to find the owners of the house and find out what they knew about the cash, whether they knew his mother, whether he had any other relatives. Alexander told the foreman the reason for his interest. He stepped in and gave him the phone number of a businessman who had recently purchased the mansion. The house was sold to us by a woman, Jenna, the older man told him when he insisted on a meeting. The only thing we had in common was that transaction. I can't say anything more about her. She was always alone, no one from her family was around. Thank you for that. Do you still have her contacts? I'd really appreciate it. Now Alex had the address of the former owner of the mansion. He was scared and happy at the same time that he could meet a person who knew and remembered his mother, who had once been happy beside her, could tell him about her childhood, about her habits and school successes. He showed the man a picture of his mother and he recognized her as the one who had sold him the house. That's right, it's her, only older. But she hasn't changed much. The new information shocked Alexander. He didn't know what was going on and he even visited his mother's grave to ask her questions he couldn't get an answer to. You're there, you couldn't sell real estate, Alex spoke to Mary. Why didn't you tell me anything about yourself? Alex's next step toward the truth was to meet Jenna. The address led him to a small house with a painted gate, which he knocked on for a long time, but did not wait for an answer. Alex was already desperate, afraid that he had been given the wrong address or that he had mixed up something, and now he would have to knock on every house in the street. At the long knock, a young woman from the next house looked out and looked at Alexander with interest. Do you need a hostess? She asked. Yes, do you know where she might be? I'm not close to her, and I don't know anything about her affairs because Jenna moved here recently. I saw an ambulance come to her the other day, she's sick and can't cope with the disease alone. Poor woman, she lives alone, she doesn't communicate with anyone. And what do you want? Maybe I'll tell her. It's a personal matter. I need a meeting. Alexander felt badly that Jenna was ill, and at this point her trail went cold. Where in the big city would he look for her, since she could lie in any of the hospitals? The neighbor immediately noticed the change in the boy's mood and smiled. Don't worry. We have the 8th hospital on the next street. Jenna was probably taken there. Thank you so much. You have helped me a lot. With trepidation and fear, Alex went to the hospital. A nurse at the nurse's station told him they had such a patient and told him which room to go to. He knocked and entered the room and was dumbfounded. On the bed his mother lay, or rather her twin sister. Alexander's legs trembled, so he grasped the door handle, and all the other patients in the ward looked at him in surprise. Boy, why are you frozen there? Did you see a ghost? Asked a woman on the far side of the bed. Excuse me, I'm on business. Alex gathered all his courage in his fist and walked over to Jenna. Hello. I know my visit may seem strange to you, but you are my mother's twin, and I don't know anything about her. You're the only person who can explain anything to me, because I'm confused. The woman looked as dumbfounded as Alexander, but her eyes were soft, silent tears ran down her cheeks. Mary. Is your mother's name Mary? She asked softly, and the boy nodded. She was, my mom had been gone for years. Jenna pressed her hands to her cheeks and cried for real. Alex brought her some water, and she began her story when she calmed down. Mary and I were twin sisters. We seldom quarreled and lived peacefully. Friendship and sympathy saved us from our father's tyranny. Your grandfather Adam was mean. Because of his hard, unyielding character, the whole family suffered. Dad was always unhappy about everything, and my mother, Mary, and I tiptoed in front of him in order not to get another scolding. He was the owner of his own business and was not used to being crossed. Mom couldn't take it for long. She had a weak heart and every scandal took its toll on her. My sister and I were left alone, with no one to protect us. I was afraid of every rustle and didn't disturb my father unnecessarily, but Mary loved freedom. She had a rebellious spirit, she didn't like to be bossed around. One day at a summer festival she met a visiting musician. Luis, I think his name was. They fell in love. Mary would sneak out on dates, knowing that her father would not approve of these meetings. When he found out about everything, he forbade her to see Luis. He even threatened to disown her, to cut her out of the will if she disobeyed. That was all Mary needed. She didn't waste a minute and left the house with her musician. It was very hard for me without my sister. We were always together, we had fun, we were scared, we got our nuts, we broke the rules. I was always quiet, but without Mary it was like happiness had left our big house. Since then we were lost. At first we corresponded, exchanged news and photos, but Luis's life was so fickle, and Mary followed him everywhere. One day she stopped writing. It's not a small town, but I hope they stayed here after all. No matter how many times I looked for my sister through acquaintances, I couldn't find her. Jenna interrupted and coughed. It was hard for her to talk for a long time, so Alex served her water again, thinking over everything he had just heard. His mother was brave and independent. It matched his childhood ideas of his mother and his dreams of her character. Then his father began to have problems in business. A series of bad deals, a betrayal of a companion, and he went under. My father was already in his old age, and the collapse of his brainchild after the escape of Mary finally beat him. After he died, the mansion passed to me. I was like a ghost in a castle, scary, lonely, depressing. I had no use for a big house, though I tried for a long time to get used to my loneliness. I had no children, no husband, so I sold the house. Alexander listened to Jenna without interrupting. He had found his own aunt, he was glad, but her emaciated appearance disturbed him. Listen to me, the woman said to Alex, we are haunted by an evil fate. Apparently, at some point we have displeased God greatly, and now we are sick and go away one by one. I soberly assess my chances, I can't get out of the hospital. I won't need the money from selling the house, but you can dispose of it. Try to be happy for all of us. I am glad to meet you. Jenna stroked her nephew on the cheek, and he was touched by her motherly tenderness. Alexander visited his aunt every day, brought her allowed goodies, entertained her, took her out for walks. The woman was very grateful to him and told him many incidents from her childhood that were connected with Mary. The family reunion lasted only 6 months. Jenna's body failed and she passed away. Alex buried her next to her mother so that the sisters could finally be reunited. Over the past few months there have been significant changes in his life. While the boy was caring for Jenna in the hospital, he met Nicole, a young nurse. They quickly found common ground. The girl was by Alexander's side after the death of his aunt and helped him to survive the loss. The young people's romance developed rapidly. They did not feel any shyness in front of each other and were so open, as if they knew they had been waiting for each other all their lives. I want to start my own business, Alex told Nicole at dinner. At first it will be a hardware store, and then, if it works out, it will be a full-fledged construction store. Great, that's so great. The girl clapped her hands and stroked her lover on the back. Your connections with the guys at the construction site will help you. They can refer clients to you, and when you are promoted, they can order everything they need from you. Oh, you fox, you look far away. Alexander laughed and hugged his sweetheart. 3 months later, the guy became the director of a growing store with an established clientele and revenue and was already planning to expand the premises. As he began to make a profit, Alex ennobled his mother and aunt's plot at the cemetery and put up a beautiful obelisk for them.